stadium lights, with three buzz before halftime. My heart racing like it's 4th and 5 on a Midwest Saturday night.
Welcome back to another episode of Mizzou Storytellers podcast. Hi, Dave.
Hello, Nikki. How's it going?
Good. It's been a week. We finished the come home tour.
We did finish, and grand fashion too.
It was fantastic.
Went out with a bang.
Yes, lovely weather at the Chicken and Pickle in St. Charles.
Mm-hmm.
So much fun.
Great venue.
Great venue. Great. We had Laird there, which was awesome to get to hear him speak for the first time, kind of live. You know, we heard him at the press conference, but that was fun. We had a bunch of student athletes, a ton of coaches, a lot of Mizzou fans.
A lot of fans.
It was,
And they were fired up. Like they were fired up to be there. Like I think the vibe was they were hoping that football season started today instead of in a few months.
I think as we're wrapping up our spring sports season, no one wants it to end. You know, we got softball who's doing great. We got Auburn baseball last series finishing up this weekend, and I think as we're wrapping up, people just want to go right into football season. Well, should we get into our guest?
Our guest was one of the featured speakers.
Yeah.
On the come home tour, several stops. He might have had as many appearances as anybody on the come home tour.
I think
he's a veteran of these type of things.
Absolutely. So I think we should just get right into the guest.
All right, let's go.
A New York native who is relentless, detail-oriented, and disciplined, a son, husband, father, and coach, the man behind Tiger Style, your Mizzou head wrestling coach, Brian Smith, and this is his story. Welcome to the Mizzou Storytellers podcast.
That was pretty cool.
She's good at that.
You know, I do my research and then I put together a little bio and
there you go. Okay.
Well, welcome to Mizzou Storytellers. You are a veteran of podcasting here in the studio, so
Tiger Style.
We're going to learn from you today.
Yeah. You should be quite comfortable up in this room.
Oh yeah, I love it down here. We're because we're in the penthouse.
Mm-hmm.
Right above here.
As you call it. Yes.
They only let certain people up there.
Yeah,
so.
you had to work your way to the penthouse, right?
That's where we started.
Has it always been? Oh.
It's always been on the 4th floor, so.
Amazing.
It just looks nicer these days.
It looks a lot nicer.
Yeah.
We actually started calling it the penthouse because it was like a storage area. The swim coaches used to share offices with us, and we were in the place that is now our wrestling room is now our weight room. So it was just there was no trophy case. It was the old olive green paint that we still see on the seats.
On the seats, yeah, yeah.
So, but I had to come up with something to change the perception of everybody. I'm like, so I would tell people, I'm on the 4th floor, but it's called the penthouse of the Hearn Center. Oh, they gave you the penthouse. And everybody's perception of what a penthouse is it's the awesome place. So, and people, when I run into marketing people or whatever, they would think, I got to get up to the penthouse. So it changes. It's just you're seeing your outlooks when I say it, your facial expressions. It changes. So we had to have something. We couldn't afford to change anything, so we changed the name.
It makes sense. And you used to have a lot more friends over here, and now you guys have survived what seems to be like the Hearn Center. You live in the penthouse, but a lot of your marketing friends, Learfield, all of them have kind of other coaches have all moved away.
We might have chased the Learfield people away because of our weight room that was the wrestling room. We changed it to the weight room. And with my big guys doing like deadlifts and boom, they thought bombs were going off.
We've heard it during taping of episodes.
Yes, every once in a while we can hear and we're like, they're working out.
That ceiling's going to hold, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. Producer Steve can neither confirm nor deny if that's why they ran away. All right, so let's get into the beginning. We talked about a New York native. You said upstate New York.
Yes.
Let's go back.
I mean, if you go way back, I grew up in Long Island the first 6 years. My dad was a football coach and teacher, football coach, I should say it that way. And we spent 6 years in Long Island, then moved up to Binghamton where my dad took a school named Catholic Central, which eventually changed into Seton Catholic Central. They combined schools and coached there for about 8 years. And so I grew up in Binghamton, which was a small city, just really cool, but cold, snowy. Thought it was the greatest because I grew up in a gym. I was a gym rat with, all summer going to weights and going to coaches' meetings. And this was as a young kid. I just grew up in a locker room with, following my dad around, and knew at the point of probably 5 or 6 years old, being on the sidelines, helping with equipment, doing it, all I ever wanted to do. I used to break down film with my dad on Sunday mornings. We would have Saturday games. After church, we'd go to this guy's house, and in the box would be the old reel-to-reel film, and we would go back to the house with the projector and break down every position. And so it was great for me. I didn't realize it at the time till I got into coaching. I learned how to be a coach. I was learning how to analyze film. I was learning how to relate with athletes, learning how to run coaches' meetings by observing my dad, who brought me along and let me, and I was constantly asking questions and wanted to learn. So that's how I ended up in New York, and then we moved to Florida.
That's right, yeah.
Which I do want to ask before we get to Florida and kind of why you moved to Florida. We had Larissa Anderson. She's obviously from New York and
Yes.
quite a skier. So do you ski or do you not ski? No, we didn't pick that up.
Because my dad was a teacher and coaching, he was always coaching and doing things. Everything was our vacations, and everything was revolved around some kind of sporting event. So we really didn't have vacations.
No skiing.
Yeah.
That's
No
okay.
skiing.
I don't
That's
ski either, and I grew
I
up in
think
the
I did
area.
go to skiing once or twice at Greeks Peak, which was not far from where Binghamton was, but I didn't.
And now you're moved to Florida, and you have interviewed. You kind of came up. You did the research on this, so you can. Do you want to ask
I
these
did
questions?
a story years ago. We talked. I hadn't realized at the time, and I almost kind of forgotten about it, that your family sacrificed a lot and moved because you had illness. You had pneumonia a lot, and you just breathing trouble, and they thought the warmer climate in Florida would be better for your upbringing.
Yeah, I was a professional student because in first grade, when we were living in Long Island, it was my first grade because I went twice. I spent the last month of the school year in a hospital room, and they were running all sorts of tests on me because I had lung issues all the time. And so when we moved to Binghamton, they were like, he's kind of young, let's have him repeat first since he missed the last month of school. And I remember being like locked into a cage of a bed because I'd run around the hospital. It still didn't slow me down, but I'd be in these oxygen tents and all these things. It was crazy. But I did have pneumonia a lot, but my parents were awesome. They kept me involved in sports. I wanted to be. I missed a lot of school throughout the years, but I just kept, going through it, and they tested me for everything, for allergies, for you name it. I was doing tests, and eventually my mom took me to, I think it was Mass General Children's Hospital or something out east, and I was going to the hospitals in New York City, and eventually one of the doctors finally said, really, if you would move him out of the cold into a better climate, there's a chance, or we could do this thing where we do something with his lungs. And my parents were like, no way, we're not doing that. So my dad decided he took a job in Orlando at Bishop Moore High School, and we moved. My older sister was not happy. I don't think my younger sister was happy. My younger brother was too young to know, but we moved to Florida and made the move, and then it was kind of crazy because I went to 3 high schools. Went to the Bishop Moore. My dad left coaching, and then so he said, you're going to have to pay for Catholic school now, and I said, I can't do that and play sports. So I went to Oviedo High School for my sophomore and junior year, but going into my after my freshman year of playing football, because all I wanted to do was play football, I was crushed that they didn't, at the time, they have great lacrosse down in Florida now. I would have never wrestled if I moved to Florida and they have the lacrosse they have now, because that was my sport.
Wow.
Upstate New York was big-time lacrosse, still is. You think of Cornell's and Syracuse.
Yeah.
I had 2 goals, a full field in my backyard, and used to play, was the leading attack scorer in the league in Binghamton. And so I was the manager for the lacrosse team at Vestal High School, where I would have ended up going. And but then when we moved, I realized, man, I don't have this. But I always played CYO basketball. So my dad was going to have me, he took me for a ride because he said, what are you going to do on Monday after football? And I said, I'm going out for the freshman basketball team. And he's kind of sat me down and was like, you realize when you look at your family, we're small and this and that. Not that you won't play. You were good in all your age group, but you're going to be getting into high school where people are continuing to grow. You're not going to grow much more. And said wrestling would be good for football. And as soon as he said that, I was like, oh, God, I hate wrestling. Because I did it for a month in 5th and 6th grade in upstate New York and just didn't enjoy it that much because you have to put a lot of time in to get better at it. And I played basketball every year and loved it. So I was like, all right, if you're saying wrestling will be good for football, and my dad was that way, he used to make all his football players wrestle if they weren't playing basketball. So I did it and really didn't enjoy it that much, but did it and it was good. Was like 14-1 as a freshman, but didn't make the varsity. But after that, I had a transfer to Oviedo, make it to the state that next year, and next thing you know, I lost to the guy that took second and third in 1-point matches. And after spring football, they actually had spring football in Florida.
Wow.
So you play a month of practices, and I was an option quarterback, and we were playing, and I was doing a really good job. And after the spring game, they said, probably not going to start you, this and that. This other kid is, who they eventually moved to tailback. I would have just been handing it off or pitching to him. But they kind of told me I wouldn't play as much, and that wasn't the deciding factor because in my mind, I knew I was going to play. But my cousin called me and said, spend the summer in Long Island where they all wrestled, and they were Division I, and he ended up being a Division II All-American. Come up here and learn really how to wrestle. You're so close that you haven't put the time in. And I thought about it, and that's when I thought, if I do this, I'm giving up the sport of football. I'm going all in, and I did it, and that changed my life. Spent 7 weeks, fell in love, came back, won the state title as a junior, and people were like, where did this person come from? He was unknown, and then transferred to St. Thomas my senior year, and we won the team title, and I won the title, so it was fun. We were the best team money could buy. I probably shouldn't have said that about St. Thomas, but we were.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, from both Dave's story and then just hearing, like, you weren't into wrestling, and so it wasn't that summer that made you fall in love with it. I was going to ask, like, what pivotal moment can you reflect on and say, like, this was when I really fell in love with it? And then obviously we look at...
I knew I was getting better as a sophomore because and then made the regional finals, made the state, and when I lost to those two guys that took second and third by a point, I was thinking, man, I don't even this is my first year really wrestling varsity and second year wrestling. I haven't put a lot of time. These kids have been wrestling for a short time. That I realized that in the spring I really committed beyond, the off time from spring football. I was at every club I could find, going over to different places and training with people and just getting better. It was like a light bulb went on, and I just couldn't get enough. And I was finding books, and back then it was video tapes on anything I could find about wrestling. And eventually got into, and even the old assistant coach from Binghamton, New York was John Allen, who wrestled at Syracuse for was a coach with my dad when he would come visit. I'd be picking his brain, and it was just, I just became really just like in love with it. And when I finished that 7 weeks with my cousin Kevin, I knew, man, this is what I want to do. This is the sport, and gave up football, and they were crushed by it. The offensive coordinator was upset, tried to get me back, and I'm like, no, this is what and when I won the state, I knew I'd made the right decision. And then leaving, I was their first state champ. One of Laird's daughters, I can't remember, she lives in Oviedo, and she told me that the other day, and I'm like, you know who the first state champ was in any sport at Oviedo High School? You're looking at him. I said, I abandoned him my senior year, but it was funny. But going down to St. Thomas, they had a great coach there that wrestled and made Pan Am teams and things like that wrestled at Michigan State. And I go down there, and there were kids above me, below me in the state finals. I was learning so much, could work out with my coach. It was like the whole season I was getting great coaching. So it was a great experience, and it got me to Michigan State.
This episode of Mizzou Storytellers on the Inside Mizzou Athletics podcast is brought to you by Shelter Insurance. Ranked number 1 in customer satisfaction for auto insurance in the Central Region by J.D. Power 5 out of the last 6 years. We're your shield. We're your shelter.
Do you think that having followed your dad and like being in that environment from such a young age, and then when you did fall in love, like one thing that I feel like I can say you are is very committed to everything that you do, and we'll get into Tiger Style, but do you think that having watched your dad from a young age be so committed to everything he was doing coaching, when you did fall in love with wrestling, you became so committed to doing everything, reading, watching, like being the best that you can be? Was that from such a young age, you think?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was a troublemaker, though. You've heard the story of how I got into reading, right?
No.
Well, I'm actually writing a book, and it's in my book that in 5th grade, so my dad's the AD, so all the Catholic schools were under, would feed into the high school that my dad was the AD and football coach. And so my principal called my dad that I got thrown out of English class, and I was sitting in the basement, and I had to go home. And what are you doing in the basement? Well, I was causing trouble, and it was like Sister Mary Margaret or something, threw me out of the class because I was disrupting it so much. So I was sitting in the basement for that 60 minutes or 50 minutes that the class was. I'd sit in the basement of the convent and do nothing. So my dad met with her and said, hey, if you're going to keep them there for a week or two, make them do something. So he came up with the idea that I would read Sports Illustrated.
There you go.
And I started having to read them and then write a summary of the articles. And I think I had a subscription to that magazine for like $35, $40 till it probably disappeared.
Yeah.
They're like, hey,
hard
we
to
don't
find now.
do
It's crazy,
printed articles
but
anymore.
It got me into reading.
Yeah.
Next thing I know, I wanted to read more, and I started reading biographies or whatever on sports heroes, and then loved history, so started reading some history things, and then that's where my love from the worst of time, getting thrown out of an English class. You think, oh, this kid will never get into it. I did get into it by the plan my dad made with, I think it was Sister Mary Margaret or something. Probably wrong, but that's what I remember.
Oh,
What was your you go to Michigan State then? What was your experience like there wrestling in the Big Ten?
Yeah,
At the
I
highest
mean,
level of college wrestling.
I had never, because I'm showing my age, the internet didn't exist.
Right.
So when I got there was a phone on the wall, so I was allowed to call once a week home, and you would find out about your opponents in a magazine, the results, which came like once every 3 weeks. So I would know where the seeds were, and you didn't have film on opponents. But it was a great experience and a difficult experience, because I got there, I had never seen a college match, didn't even know what it was like, and started as a freshman in the Big Ten and got thrown out there, and it was a tough year. I know I had a losing record, placed in some tournaments, but it was really, was overwhelmed by had wrestled 3 years of varsity wrestling, and then showed up at the Big Ten and was starting, and thought I was like, man, maybe I'm in over my head, but worked really hard. But then after the first year, the whole coaching staff, the head coach retired. The assistant coach was a 4-time runner, a 4-time national finalist, 2-time champ from Michigan State, had been there forever, and they passed him over for the job. And they hired a guy in, and the program just went way downhill. It just really struggled. And so I started that year, took 5th in the Big Ten, had made a huge jump, and I still hadn't redshirted. And I kept telling my dad that there's lots of problems going on in the program, and just all these issues and kids not liking it. And I learned how not to coach a lot in those time periods. And it's not, there were some things I did learn that were positive from this coaching staff, but a lot now how not to coach. And the culture just fell apart in the program. And that's where I'm so big on culture. I tell guys, man, I was in a program where the culture was awful, and I just knew it was why we weren't succeeding. And so then I went on and took 3rd the next year. I redshirted the next year, thinking maybe this coach will get fired. He ended up getting fired, I think, the year after I left. So, but then took 2nd. So I went to the Nationals twice, but never reached my goal of becoming an All-American. Came close, lost in the All-American round, and thought it was like the end of the world. And I just remember I'm going to go in. So the next week was spring break, and I said I'm going to get a head wrestling job and a teaching job, and I'm going to put all this anger and frustration into coaching. And that's what I did. And I took a job in Fort Lauderdale at Western High School and loved it. I mean, I loved it. We were second in the state. The team had never finished in the top 10. We were second in the state the first year. I started practice in August.
Wow.
I got turned in every week for cheating. It was awesome. And I meet with the principal, and I'm like, I got a club. There's outside guys coming, and so we would get cleared. But it was fun because people knew I was doing some stuff. I had a wrestling class. So my wrestlers would come to morning practice, then they would go to wrestling class, then they would go to wrestling practice. And it was a lot of fun. Lee Pritz, who coached with me here, started with me here. He's the head assistant at Arizona State now, was a 2-time state champ with me. My brother came over from St. Thomas for second semester and wrestled and then went back.
Oh, wow.
So we were doing some things that were crazy, but I really thought that was what I wanted to do and loved it, and was coaching JV football and really thought eventually I'd take over, be the head football, head wrestling. That was like heaven to me. Just coaching and teaching history, which I still love, and a couple wrestling classes. But then I got a call to be the restricted earnings coach at Cornell, and I say that
That's a title.
it was a real title. You were restricted on how much you could make, which was $12,000. And I was making not a huge amount, but a lot more than that with coaching and camps and my coaching job. And had just bought a house and decided, everybody told me, oh, you'd be crazy. We took second and fourth in the state. I had a junior high program that was starting to build up, and I knew we were going to start to win titles here soon. And everybody was like, why would you want to go to Cornell and take a position like that? And my dad talked me into going to college because he never could.
Oh,
he
wow.
got married, had my older sister and then me, and he had a lot of friends that coached in the NFL, were at college. Even Richie Moran was a coach with him at Elmont High School, was the head lacrosse coach, won national titles. So he had all these friends, successful coaches in college, but he never made the jump. And he's like, you have nothing right now. And I was dating Denise at the time, who's been my wife for 30 years. And I told her, hey, I know we've been dating a year, but I'm leaving you. I'm going to take this job because I just think it's the right thing. I just felt like my dad told me, give it a try. And he was right, because you could always get a high school job. High school jobs, with especially the 2 years that I had, there would be a lot of schools would hire me. So I did it, went up there, and we took 10th in the country the first year. Had a bunch of All-Americans, and then the second year I took the head job at St. Thomas. They offered me to come back, and actually my sister-in-law had me for history, and I was there in the summer running a camp when Jack Spates, who was the head coach at Cornell, took the job at Oklahoma. Rob Cole took over, who was the other assistant. He's like, come back, I'll pay you whatever you're making there and some. And I said, all right, let's go. Denise, pack up. We're going to Cornell for the second year. And I showed back up for the second year and went 4 more years and eventually got the head job at Syracuse.
Well, go ahead, Nikki.
Well, I just think it's so interesting that you said this, like I was going to ask this, but when you left from Michigan State, went back to Florida and you were coaching, you were like, I had it. Like I had it all planned out, and I this was what I wanted to do, and you had like a path and goals and stuff, and then Cornell calls and you go to Cornell, and it kind of with your dad, and obviously you are where you are now, but you kind of mentioned it, like you didn't necessarily look for Cornell or expect Cornell.
I used to just talk to Jack about I coached the national teams of Florida. I would help coach, so he would call me for who are the smart kids. You training them in the summer, and so I thought that's why he was calling. He's like, how would you like to be the and he would even get mad at me because I would substitute teach. Cole and I would tease him about it. Rob Cole eventually became, because I would go sub like twice a week and get $100 for subbing in New York, which that was $200 extra bucks a week.
Yeah.
I needed that for rent and food. So there were no training. Believe me, the Ivies didn't have much. There was limited resources with athletics, and so it was a great experience. Yes, I wasn't searching it out. I'd be on my 34th or 5th year in teaching. I'd probably be retiring. But, it was, that's one of the, when people say, are there any regrets? It's not regrets. It's just I miss having the opportunity to actually teach in the classroom. I loved it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I really enjoyed teaching history. So it was just something that, I wanted to do, and that was the one thing I had to sacrifice.
Was it world history, American history? What was
Both.
What was your
They
favorite
give you the
era?
crap. They give you all the ninth graders.
My dad's a
First
history
year
teacher, or he was.
I
so,
remember
yeah.
being in a teaching lounge. I probably shouldn't tell you this, but
That's good.
there
That's
was
what we're here for.
It was a big school, and there was like eight or maybe 10 history teachers in the history lounge, and they were talking about having to pink slip a couple teachers, and some lady was on the other side of the cubicle to me, and I was sitting with Jeff Long, who was the JV basketball coach, and she's like, she actually said this. She goes, I think I'm going to get a pink slip. I've been teaching for 8 years, and some wrestling coach has been here for 1 year, and he's not going to get one because he's a coach. Why is he being protected and this and that? And I was like, oh, I want to go over the edge. And I wanted to put my 2 cents in because I wanted to tell her, I see you leaving at 3:30, and I'm here every night. I open it up all summer. I'm here on the weekends. I'm doing things with kids constantly. I wanted to, but I didn't. I sat there, and she probably did get pink slipped, and I didn't.
You just sit
And here
back
we
and
are.
smile. Yeah.
we are.
But I did love it. I did love history teaching and just being in the school environment. And the difference between college, because you can have impact. I was with one of my former wrestlers, and I remember the first week on the job, he was a friend of my brother's. He was the same age, my younger brother. We were 9 years apart. And I remember Freddie being in the house all those times. And Freddie was at school, and he was a junior at the time, and he wasn't even wrestling. So I pulled this kid. I found out his blow-off class, don't take this the wrong way, but he didn't need it for college or whatever. And
Right.
he wasn't even thinking college. He was in a horticulture class. Okay, we were in Western Fort Lauderdale. So it was, they actually had hitches still for the horses, and it was very cowboyish. And I went and grabbed Freddie at a horticulture class and told him I moved him into wrestling class. You're wrestling now. And he's like, what are you talking about? I was like a big brother to him. I'm not doing that. And I'm like grabbing him and dragging him to wrestling class. I want to be in I'm like, no, you're in wrestling now. You're going to be in class, and you're coming to practice today. And he started to do it, was on the JV. By the end of the year, he qualified for state. His senior year, he was a runner-up in the state, and I sent him to Georgia State. But the story behind, and becomes their winningest wrestler in history. They eventually dropped the program, but went to nationals twice. But the bigger thing was, when I told the AD I was doing that, he's like, that kid's nothing but trouble. And he had gotten in trouble with the law because he got in a fight with an undercover cop at like a 7-Eleven type store. It was called Farm Store. So he had a nickname that was, I won't even tell you, because then you'll know who it is. He'll know who this is if he watches. But I was just with him this past weekend, so he wasn't allowed out of the county. So I had to go to the judge and say, I'm going to watch him. You have to let him out. And, he was a 16-year-old kid that just got in an argument with a guy at a store, and next thing you know is he pulls out a badge. And so, but he was not even going to go to college. He eventually gets to go to college, and I think of my thoughts of, if I didn't grab that kid out of horticulture, if I would have listened to the AD who said, I wouldn't want this kid. I said, man, if I was going to war, this is the kid I want by my side, because he just needs a little love and somebody that'll give him new direction. And he's like, nope, you're going to mess this up. The kid goes there, graduates. He's the CEO of his own company now, killing it, doing great things. And I'm thinking, wow, if I would have let him go back to horticulture, he'd be, who knows, still living in Davie, Florida.
Which is funny because my dad moved to South Florida. This is a side note. Moved to South Florida. He lived in Pembroke Pines, and he lived in Davie for the past 3 or 4 years. He just moved over to Cape Coral, but he lived in Davie, so I'm familiar.
Cape Coral's in.
It's like by Fort Myers.
Fort Myers.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
So,
I know all those areas.
yeah.
Yeah, but he'll tell you that there's still cowboyish out there.
Yeah. No, definitely.
Which people don't think of, South
Not
Florida.
No.
No, yeah, I would agree.
So, non sequitur to Syracuse. What was that like? You take over as a college head coach. Did you think at that point you got it all figured out? You're going to run your program. You're gonna get this one going in the right direction. How'd that go?
Well, here's a lot of people don't know. Syracuse dropped the program.
Mm-hmm.
My last year at Cornell, and brought it back. The boosters and alumni fought to bring it back and said they raised all this money, but the school said, okay, we need a check for $2 million. We'll give you 4 years. And everybody's like, who's going to take that job? And I had been up for, I think that was like my 7th or 8th interview. And I had gotten some jobs, turned them down, and was close on a couple others. And I thought, man, this is Syracuse. If I go there, there's so many famous alumni, this and that. Let's go try and do this. I know how to raise money. Let's go make this happen, and I'll be a head coach. And everybody was like, that's the worst mistake you're ever going to make in your career. It's a dead end. They're going to drop it. And when I got there and actually talked to the administration, I said, ooh, what a big mistake, because they lied to me, didn't tell me I had a stack of paper of pledges, but not one penny raised. But I started collecting the money. We ran a huge fundraiser at Tavern on the Green, which is one of the most famous restaurants in the country, but it's in Central Park. Very wealthy. Got Steve Croft, who was the executive producer of 60 Minutes, played tennis at Syracuse. So he was going to MC it. Dan Gable to come in, Billy Baldwin, and all those people. A lot of famous actors were coming. The Heisman Club donated stuff. So we had an auction, famous people sold it out, raising money. And I was on the phone with Missouri for a job at that time, because when I finished the season, I went to the administration and said, if I keep raising money, will you let me endow positions and scholarships? And they're like, yeah, if you do, but you'll have to also endow it for one female scholarship. And I said, that doesn't make sense to me. Why do I have to do this, raise all this money just to save the program, and then raise more money, have to raise double for the women's sports? That doesn't seem fair to me. And at that point, I knew they didn't want it. They didn't want to help, because I was raising money. So got offered the job at Cleveland State a week before, turned it down, and didn't even know if I was going to have an interview. I was talking with Peter Fields at the time, who was the AD, associate AD here, and he's like, I don't know what to tell you. But then a week later, they said, you have an interview. And I did that because I knew I wanted to be a Big 10 or Big 12 coach. That was my ultimate dream. And I had a mentor tell me that if your ultimate goal is to be a Big 10, Big 12, and you take the Cleveland State job, you will always regret not taking that chance of the interview at Missouri. So I did and got the job.
We were between ADs at the time, weren't we? Because Joe had left.
I
or
got
was Joe,
hired by
Joe's last
Joe.
hire? I think it was last hire.
Okay. That was probably his last phone call with you, because he called me, and Joe went to St. Thomas Aquinas.
Okay.
I didn't know Joe. We're different ages, and he was there at a different, but it was a connection. And he calls me, and he's like, hey, Brian, and Peter was on the phone too. Hey, we got good news and bad news. I'm like, okay, well, the good news is we're going to offer you the job. And I'm like, awesome. What's the bad news? He's like, tomorrow I'm going to be in Norman announced as the new AD. And I'm like, well, that's weird that I'm going to lose my AD in a day. And I really like Joe. I got to spend an hour with him when I was here on the interview. And George Smith, the AD and football coach from St. Thomas, helped me with this. And his daughter was working at Missouri too, that I used to communicate with. But it was that was an end. But got to know Joe, and we're still close. Like every duel we ever have at Oklahoma, he comes and we visit. That he always says I was one of his better hires at Missouri, which I agree.
Well, he can take credit for a day of being your boss. Yeah,
but I mean, he hired you, so
he did. I think it was Sarah Reisman. The people I still remember all the people that interviewed me. Dave Tobe, who's the associate head coach for the Chiefs, who I ended up living with, because they said, here, you got a week, and I had a month or so till I could even get to a house. So Dave let me live in his basement. It was Hap Whitney, who has since passed, a former coach. Joe Paulson, who worked in the school system, wrestled and played football here. So it was a really cool committee. They're definitely wanting, I could see the energy and wanting to win here, and so that was.
What was that like going into? I remember that summer I was in school here, and I've got to kind of pick up the pieces of this program and build it. Oh, and I don't even know who my boss is going to be. Like, how much uncertainty was there, or was that kind of off your radar? You just had to build the program.
I guess it just, to me, it didn't matter. And I would even say that to Laird. I don't think it matters. You have to focus. Yes, it does. You want them to support your program, and when I look at what Laird's going to do and go out and raise money, and that's so important. But for me, I got to worry about what I'm doing. I want to have a great relationship with an AD, but I had so much work to do that it didn't matter. That I didn't even have coaches yet. So I was like, it took me like 2.5 months to get a
Wow.
coach. And so it was just then getting to know a team that I knew nothing about.
Yeah.
I didn't even recruit the kids that were coming in as freshmen. Are they still going to come? So it was a whirlwind what I was just trying to do, and then figure out. I had never worked with scholarships because the Ivies,
Oh, yeah.
for 5 years there's no scholarships in the Ivy Leagues. But I knew how to recruit, and I knew how to work with financial aid and all that kind of stuff. So it was exciting. I learned a lot over probably the first 4 or 5 years were just learning about how to do everything and learning
Yeah.
to get to know coaches in Missouri. Those years went by so fast. It seemed like forever when I was going through it, but it was difficult times, but then it started to change. My first recruiting class was a kid named Kenny Burleson that came in an All-American. J.P. Reese was a great wrestler who wrestled for Pat Melkovich, who recruited me to Michigan State, was on that first coaching staff, and Jeremy Spates, whose dad hired me to Cornell.
Yeah.
So Jeremy was gray shirting at Oklahoma, which is you're not red shirting, you're actually sitting at a school and growing after you graduate high school. And he knew he wasn't going to make the team at Oklahoma, so his dad picked 2 schools that he'd let him wrestle for, and I was one of them. And he came up here, loved it, and ends up being an All-American for us. But that first class really changed, everything about the program.
I feel like you talk about, when you talk about the story kind of how you've been here and like through the process, you don't hide that it was difficult at times and it was hard work. And
we
obviously
went 22 and 30 in the first 3 years. I looked at the first year we went down to Okie State and we got beat 44-0, and that was a normal, like if we won a match, I think that whole weekend we won 1 match. At the Big 12 tournament, we won 1 single match.
Wow.
So in the whole tournament.
which is now
Which is
looking at
insane.
it, it's
Yeah.
insane
It's
to think.
insane to think that way. Now when we lose a match, it's like, oh man, we lost that match, and I was like, man, we used to go like 1-19.
What kept, during those struggles, what kept you believing that you were going to get this figured out? Or did you know?
I never thought we wouldn't.
Yeah.
It was just that first year, we didn't have we didn't get to recruit the kids, but the kids that came in stuck. 18 kids quit. But I just saw it that second summer how much it changed. And when that first class came in, they started as true freshmen. So Jeremy Spates and JP, all those kids were starting right away. And they weren't prepared for it, but they grew up. And then I redshirted all of them, and actually redshirted Woodley, was a freshman that year, and sat a bunch of kids, and just knew that this next year we were going to have a lineup. And we would be losing matches in the third year, and we were battling hard and had some good kids in the lineup, but then I'd look over and the guys that were not wrestling, I'm like, God, if we had them today, we'd be winning these duels. But I truly believe I'm sticking with this plan. And so this was the third year of being really bad, but you could see the change. And that fourth year, going into the season, the whole team stayed for the summer. The first year I got here, nobody stayed. There was nobody. The cicadas are coming out now, those bugs. They came out my first year, and the only reason I went into the room, because nobody was there, they would attack the yellow mats that we had in the practice room, and they would be covered, so I'd be sweeping them up every day. But going into that fourth season, everybody stayed, everybody trained. It was the excitement on the fourth in the penthouse was great, because guys were lifting and training. And going into the first duel, we kept hanging up signs, expect to win everywhere. At the urinals, at the lockers, the stairwell, everywhere it was, you got to expect to win. You're putting in all this time, it's going to happen. I think Illinois was ranked 9th in the country. They had a bunch of kids that were on the U20 and U20 world teams, and they had a team that was coming back that was really, really good. We weren't even ranked, and we went in there and won 6 of the 10 matches. 3 of them went overtime, and we found a way to win every one of those. It was awesome. It was at a high school in St. Louis, packed, and I just remember another coach from another school got called by one of our former All-Americans and said, "Can you believe Mizzou just won?" And the guy said, "What, did Illinois' bus go off the road?" Because he thought it could never happen. We ended up going 18-3 that year. And that's when Tiger stopped. That year was when it really evolved.
And we'll get into it. Tiger style, the phrase, it was Spates, wasn't it? That kind of came up with it.
It was his nickname.
And it
the
just
nickname
stuck.
of their high school was the Norman Tigers or whatever, and Norman North. I think it was Norman or Norman North. Oh boy, I'm gonna get yelled at for that.
Either one.
But they would break down. So they started doing it, and then during that season, we made the finals of a duel tournament, the Virginia Duels, and we were in the finals. Before we went over, I remember sitting the team down, had my assistants pull out a pad and paper, and they started writing down. I asked the guys, I'm like, hey, what do you guys think Tiger style means? Tell me, we break it down, we say it all the time, what is it? And we had talked about it in the past, but I said, right now, going into this, we're really good right now. What does it mean to you? And they started giving me all these things. It's this belief, it's working hard, it's taking the stairs, it's we got to compete in everything we do. And I started getting all these things, and we wrote it down. And after that season, that's when I really sat down and used mentors, all the books I would read, and said, I got to evolve this and put it on paper. And I actually knew that I had to do it, and then I was reading Pete Carroll's book. I should know the name of it, but it's a great book on culture. And he said for like 20 years of his career, he never wrote anything down. Once he wrote it down, win forever. He started to evolve as a coach. And I had people constantly asking, what is Tiger style? That's why I knew I had to write it down. And that it was just, we created the triangle, which I was on the NCAA committee, so I'd go to Indy, and I get thrown out of seeding meetings if my guys were up for seeds. And there were times I'd get thrown out for 30, 40 minutes, and I'd walk by the wooden triangle. But this was after. But his triangle's really in depth. Ours is just simple: believe, compete, one more, expect to win. That's all Tiger style. But there's a lot of words that go with it. But it evolved, and once I got it on paper, it was easier to speak in public. It was easier to recruit. Our alumni loved it, and we started putting it on camp shirts. And at those early years, we were getting close to 2,000 kids at camps. It was amazing, the 3 weeks we were doing at camps, and every kid was getting Tiger style on there. We were teaching the culture to the kids, showing them how to live it, and coaches loved it, and hundreds of coaches were coming to those camps, going back and saying, man, I love this. Do you mind if I steal it and call it, Falcon style or whatever? And I'm like, that's a compliment that you're stealing and doing those things. I would go into, we would do some satellite camps, and in their rooms they'd have expect to win and all these things on there, and it still goes on, and I still love it that coaches are still using it. And I'm meeting with one of the coaches here, and they want to know the way we recruit with Tiger style, and I'm like, I'd love to share it with you. So it definitely made us organized, and there's a way to say words, but when you organize and write it down, and then what happened is you start to evolve stories. And those stories are like, the Bible guides behavior. When you think about it, the stories in the Bible are, if you take the prodigal son, or the when the guy's walking on the road, what am I thinking? I'm drawing a complete blank. When people pass by, Good Samaritan.
Good Samaritan, yes.
We have laws, and people know that being a Good Samaritan is the right thing. That came from the Bible. I said, if that person that created that story was paid today as a marketer, it's one of the greatest stories. It's a law. It's this. It's amazing. So I knew that we had to find stories to go with it. And of course, as guys started to evolve and get better, Ben Askren's and Mark Ellis's, and that it wasn't always easy for them, and the stories that evolved from it was awesome. That the kids, you can sell these stories to the kids, whether it's in recruiting, speaking to fundraising groups, or to recruits. It evolves. So now I have tons, and that's why I'm putting it in a book. That's how it evolved, and these stories sold it, and it's just been fun to see how it grows and grows, and people really want to be a part of it now.
Well, and the stories too they're supported by the results then. And then all of a sudden you start producing national champions, and like when you put the two together, that's pretty unique. That's pretty powerful, I would imagine.
It is. And you have to have breakthroughs, and that day that season 18-3 was huge, but then 2 years later we upset number 1 Oklahoma State, and we were 0-30, I think, at the time in the history of the program against Okie State. And so that was a huge win. It was Hazelwood Central Gym, 3,500 people packed in there. I think the heater was working, and it was a hot day in November, and so it was like 100 degrees. We somehow pulled off a win, and it was amazing. The whole world shook by that of wrestling because, Mizzou just beat Oklahoma State. And I think that year we finished really high and did a great job. And that year was Ben's freshman year. He made the national finals. But then, of course, 3 years after that, he wins the national title, and we get that breakthrough.
Right.
That was a battle because everybody would say they don't have facilities. They don't have national champs. They don't even have All-Americans that often. They don't have guys making world teams. So I was like, well, that's how I sold Ben to come.
Yeah.
I sold him because I said, yeah, we haven't, but you're going to be the first. You're going to be the guy that leads us to that. And he loved that. Where they were selling him on the negative, I was selling him on, you can become that. And now he's one of the greatest athletes competitors to ever come through Mizzou.
And now you've got credibility as a coach and as a program because the results are there, and you can't deny the results.
No, it started to happen.
Oh,
and there were things along the way that we were doing with our culture that people were seeing and saying, man, if I have a good kid, I'm going to send him there. And that's something, when I tell young coaches, I'm like, the decisions you make week in and week out and the type of kids you're going to recruit, it's going to affect you 3 and 4 years down the line. The kids you don't get, I remember recruiting kids that ended up going to Big Ten schools and this and that in my early years, and they were like, Coach, I look back, you were my favorite choice, but your program just wasn't there yet, and now I see where it is, and I wish I would have come, but it wasn't. But I can tell you, I was telling kids from my high school, a kid from Ohio or whatever, that you should look at Mizzou because I loved it, that you're going to lose some battles, but you can win the war later on, that you have to do everything the right way. And it's hard to know that, but it's like putting that effort, the way you're going to sell the program, the way you're going to treat kids, the way you're going to treat kids when they tell you they're not coming, and just the way you talk with coaches, the high school coaches, and build that relationship. Even when you don't get the kid, it's like, hey, the next one I'm going to get from you. And it's just that's how it builds, that eventually you get those kids, and it gets better and better and better.
Tiger fans, say aloha to Hawaiian Bros, where the island-inspired flavors are positively delicious. You'll love favorites like huli huli chicken, luau pig, and the delectable Dole soft serve. Hawaiian Bros, just south of campus on Grindstone Parkway, or order at hawaiianbros.com.
Absolutely.
I go back to what you said about your time at Michigan, like your time as a student athlete.
Michigan
State.
Yeah,
I know.
don't
I didn't
say
say
that.
Michigan.
Coach
I stopped. I
Coach
switched.
Todd is from Michigan, and
Michigan
I let him on
State.
staff.
Sorry, Michigan State. But your time at Michigan State, and you learned kind of about the culture you didn't want to be around, and you created that culture that you do want to be around. And I think what's so important about Tiger Style is, everyone lives it. It's not just something that's said. So can you talk to us a little bit about taking the stairs and just some of those more, I guess, things that actually go into Tiger Style? Because every coach, every student athlete, I laugh because Ben Ramirez, my first year, who was your SID, he one time was like, oh, coach yelled at me because I didn't go to class, or said I wasn't. I think he tweeted, I'm not going to go to class because I'm going to something. And you
he did,
responded.
And I chewed him out. Oh, I chewed him
yes.
at the next staff meeting. I said, what the hell is this?
Yes.
What's the one team rule we have about, besides living Tiger Style?
Yes.
He's like, go to class.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's never going to happen again.
Yeah, and it didn't. And he said,
didn't.
so
And he's
talk
still
to us-
living it.
Yes.
He still texts me and
Yes.
everything, and he's out in California. And that's a thing that everybody on staff is expected to live it too.
Yep.
So I get on them too if they're not doing it right. But it's, if we're all going to do this, we're doing it together. But when I started, I knew we weren't. My mindset was we got to win, but I knew our chances of winning were slim. So what were some small things we could do to start creating success? So getting here, I'd see Norm Stewart getting off the elevator, and my team was taking the elevator. I'm like, it's 2 flights up. What are we doing? Let's take the stairs. We're not going to be like basketball, and that wasn't a discredit to basketball, but we're wrestling. We do it the tough way and the hard way, and so it's to create a mindset. Even though you're doing something physical, you're creating a mindset. We're going to take the stairs, so we did, and now guys never take the stairs. I'll run into guys. I was talking to Grant Leith when he was coaching at Stanford. They had offices on, and he goes, I never take the elevator. All the other coaches do. I'm still taking the stairs, coach. So it created a mindset We didn't let them cross the lines. There's the circles in the room, and when they're running around the room, they can't cut the circle. And it was just, don't take shortcuts. So you're creating something physical that sets the mindset in order that we don't take shortcuts. We're going to every class. Why? Ben Askren said, you make me go to class, so I'm going to do it. And he became a 4-time academic All-American. So it just creates that we're going to do it this way. It's basically the military. What's the first thing they do in the military? What's the admiral gave the speech on, make your bed. They had to make their bed so you accomplish something. That first thing when you wake up in the morning, the first thing I do when I get to work, I take the stairs. It gets me in the mindset, we're going to get this accomplished. When I had a bad back and I had surgery this past summer, I was still taking the stairs. I just went slower. And it's that mindset. So we had to start with that, and then it evolved into effort in the practice room. You can run out of time in a match or in practice, but you lose, but you can't not give effort. You can control that. And so that was a mindset. Everybody's got to give effort. You're not allowed to sit in our practice room. It's just something they get tired, and I'll see them sitting. I'm like, get up, and they have to get up. And it's only an hour and a half practice. You can stand for practice. You're going to be standing in the match. So just small things like that just evolved into, your belief that if and that's in the beginning of the year. I say, what do you guys want to accomplish? What do you believe that makes you accomplish this? And they start giving me all these things that they should do to get where they want to be, which is a national title. Then we start to live by those things, and that's how it evolves. And you got to compete. We competed everything. When there used to be the real serious, they still have the Tiger Cup. We haven't won in a couple of years, but our guys are very competitive. They used to have sporting events that I think we ended up wrestling. I say we because I'd go to the events and wrestling would be playing so physical that they'd be afraid they'd be taking knees out of women's basketball or gymnastics. I watched the dodgeball game once, and we destroyed the women's gymnastics team. And I was standing with a football coach, and he's like, what jerks these guys are. And I go, I love these guys. They're going to have the competition.
These are my guys.
We're showing up to win. We're coming to win it. And they were so competitive that it was a little embarrassing because they would practice in the practice room for it. But that's the mindset. When I speak to businesses, I get asked to speak at a lot of corporations and businesses. I said, if I took you guys, instead of asking who the top salesman is, I could take you guys out and play a kickball game and watch who's ultra competitive, and I want that person because I know they're trying to figure out how to win. Whether it's kickball or whether it's a cold call, whatever it may be, I want that person that's ultra competitive and wants to win. And that you can take that person and teach them how to be successful because they have this attitude that I don't care what I'm doing, I'm going to try and do it right. And that's what I grew up in. The Smith household, and all the Smiths were always like, "Oh, that's the best you can do." You satisfied with that? That's it? Oh, okay. And then my dad would be like, oh, "Okay." Or you cheat if you must. If you're winning, cheat if you must. You had to cheat to win, probably. It was just crazy household that you're just never satisfied with anything.
My mom and I are very competitive, and we always say everything's a competition, even if you don't know it's a competition. Yep. So everything. But
that's a great thing.
Yeah. No.
My wife taught at Columbia Catholic for all those years, and I'd be like, "How's the class?" And I'd go, "Oh yeah, you got a little wrestler in there." She goes, "Oh yeah, he thinks PE is the world championship. It's a little Brian," because I'm still that way. And
my mom teaches PE,
she would call
so
those kids
everything.
Little Brians.
Yes.
I got a little Brian in there, and so it was. I said, "That's awesome. They're gonna think how great they're gonna be then.
They're gonna be successful in this world." You talk about dodgeball, but I know that the wrestlers will just play, or I don't know. Do you just
always.
they're always playing? I feel like they spend a lot of time, obviously, practice and just competing against each other in what seems to be everything. But kickball, dodgeball, they're not
team
only
handball. We go to Devine. Last Friday they were playing soccer and team handball, and it's. Hopefully they don't listen to this. I hope they do.
No, I got you.
But they think that the games day on Friday in the off season is like a fun day, and they're not working out, and they end up they have my assistant will run and play with them sometimes, and he'll be like, "Man, we ran 4 or 5 miles today playing soccer or team handball." That they're so stupid, I can fool them into running 4 miles, and they work hard because they're so stupid competitive.
Yeah.
And that's the great thing about it, that they're going to play hard, and it's a lot of fun that I can get them doing something other than wrestling. Because if we do wrestle year round, but I have to change it up and make a couple days where they're off the mats doing something else and doing a different way with their bodies to not wear their bodies out.
Well, and sports are fun, and so you're giving fun, adding fun to it.
We're
taking
good in
their mind.
kickball.
Yeah.
We took on Larissa's team one year and we destroyed them, and they were embarrassing, talking trash to them, and so I'm sure they'll want to rematch. If they played us in softball, they would kill us.
Oh, probably.
I watched
Yeah.
that ball.
Maybe she should convince you all to play some softball and see how that one goes.
Oh, we would get crushed.
It's perfect.
We have a basketball hoop in the room,
Oh, okay.
and they can't play basketball. I told Dennis, don't come up.
So
There's no hope.
It's
in
not
it.
So
pretty.
there'll be no little pickup basketball happening.
No.
Okay, good segue, because I wanted to ask about your guys that have gone on to other careers in their second career. We're talking about your MMA guys and,
Yeah.
and Ben and Woodley and Michael, obviously Chandler.
Johnny Eblin's the
and Johnny
Bellator
Eblen,
champ
sure.
now.
How do you view that? I don't know if you encourage it. You just support it. You watch
I mean,
it and
I'll
have fun
support
with it.
whatever. If
Yeah.
they're going to do it, like when they were going into it, I'm like, why? You're so
Mhm.
bright, and you're going to be getting your head punched in. And I think after one of Michael's fight, he did a Rocky thing where he let the guy hit him. I'm like, what are you thinking? You got a wife and kids, and you're like, he's like, I know, I just got the adrenaline, and it wasn't hurting me. I'm like, it hurt you the next day, I bet.
Yeah.
But it's, wrestling is the most successful segue into the
Yeah.
MMA. When you look at the results, there's no doubt about it. Jiu-jitsu is good, but even all those other, from whether it's judo or jiu-jitsu, all those things, all those athletes will say wrestlers train the hardest, and
Yeah.
it's because they know how to train, and they've been trained since young kids in this conditioning. That's the easy part for them, where it's harder for the other sports to do that part. So I just know it's an easy way to be successful, but it is a tough
Yeah.
sport.
Yeah.
I mean, you're getting kicked in the knees and punched in the face. It's hard, but they've had great careers. Woodley
Yeah.
was a UFC champ. Ben was an F1 and what was it, the Fight One
Mhm.
and Bellator champ,
Right.
and got into the UFC and got some fights.
Yeah.
Got knocked out quick in the last one, but
Little
he
bit.
won one. But had a great career and
Yeah.
made a lot of money off of it. I know that. So they've done well. And Michael will fight Conor McGregor.
There we go. June
And I'm
29th.
taking my boys.
Are you going?
Taking my
You
boys.
are.
Oh, I was
and
gonna
I
ask.
told Michael I'm going to go, so he's all pumped up. I'm going to be there. So we talk. We text back and forth all the time.
Yeah.
He'll text me right before nationals. The great thing is all of them. Ben is definitely really involved still
Right.
with the program, with his academies where we get kids from, and then Tyron Woodley still close
Sure.
with the program. So that's the neat thing of our program. We always say Tiger Style is not a 4 or 5 year commitment; it's a lifetime. And our alumni events, our alumni gatherings. Ben still has one at his house where 19 former guys and their families come back.
Wow.
And Denise and I went up there one year. It was amazing. The campers, he has like 5 or 6 acres. He has a disc golf course on his
Yeah,
property. Go
yeah.
figure, Ben.
Of course.
But it was a lot of fun. Campfires with the families and living in the past and telling the old stories.
Yeah.
It was a great time. How close our groups are.
Oh, sure. Yeah, Michael was on Instagram just the other day wearing his Mizzou gear, talking about the McGregor
Yep.
fight and his walk-on story, and it's inspiring. It's so cool to see that those guys are still connected.
Oh, without a doubt.
Yeah.
I was in Nashville trying to meet up with Michael, but he's like, I can't come and meet you. I was gonna go out there, but he was. It's neat.
Yeah,
they
absolutely.
are the ones that'll be there and be watching at the NCAA's. They follow it. They actually follow it real close because I'll be like, what the heck's going on with so and so?
Oh, yeah.
But they'll even come back in the room and keep trying. They still
Yeah.
get on the mats. So
That's awesome. And Ben has some opinions on things, so which is always fun.
Ben is that guy that will say all the things you want to say, but you won't. But Ben will do it. He's that guy, and I love him for it.
He's something
That's
else.
why I recruited him. He was the
Yeah.
kid that was very outspoken, and everybody thought he was arrogant. And they actually thought he was into drugs because he would wear tie-dye shirts
Yeah.
and no shoes in Wisconsin. They just thought he was a hippie with the hair and all that. Then when you talk to him, he still was a goofball, but he was the most intelligent hippie, tie-dye wearing, but committed to the sport like there's no end.
Yeah.
I mean, and very bright, reading books, and now he's written a book. And
Yeah.
so it's just, if you get to, that's where you can't judge the cover.
Right.
When you get to know Ben, he's very, very intelligent.
One of the most fascinating characters to come through.
Yeah.
Mizzou
No,
athletics
absolutely,
in
and
generations.
that makes me think, like, when you're recruiting someone, like, did you automatically or like immediately know this kid is different, and if we get this this kid is going to change the trajectory of the program?
First, watching him wrestling and his style was so different, and then when I got to talk to him, I didn't really know what was going on with how much he was hated, because the chat rooms were just starting, and Ben would get on, and he was like, his idol was Muhammad Ali, so he would predict, hey, Dave, I'm going to pin you in the second period. And people were like, who is this guy? And he would go out and pin the guy in the second period. And then he'd be like, see, pinned you. And he would talk trash on the new chat rooms that had just come out. And then he told some people that he was all business, and he showed up with an overcoat and a hat and a briefcase for the face-off that they do with the finals, and he showed up in that. So he was that guy that did this stuff that was considered cocky or arrogant, but he backed it up. I mean, he was destroying people. He set the record for takedowns, but then his senior year got hurt and had to pull out of the state tournament. But he was already a couple-time state champ, and he was just trying to do it. He was already committed to Mizzou, and I was like, just don't wrestle. But he's like, I got to try, but he couldn't do it. But then about a month later, he goes into the high school national tournament. I think he took second on still a bad ankle, but still wrestled unbelievable. He was just amazing. Yeah, but I wrote him notes. I was like, what are the different things I can do recruiting? And with Ali being his idol, I would write him. We write notes to kids all the time, but I would always end it with an Ali quote, where there's a ton of. And then we'd have the next week, I like that quote, and we get in this conversation about it. And he liked that, and selling him on being the first. He loved that. So awesome. That was the vision. He bought into it and loved it. And Jeremy Spates and Mark Bader and all those guys that are still involved with the sport of wrestling. Mark's with Flow Wrestling, and Jeremy's the head coach of Southern Illinois Edwardsville, sold him as the upperclassman. Come in, you're going to love it here. We're changing the culture. He loved it.
That's great.
Year 27 loading, right?
Yeah,
technically it starts.
April 30th was it was my hire date, so I'm a couple weeks in now.
So take yourself back to day one, 27 years ago. Did you ever imagine that Mizzou wrestling would be what it is now, and would have had the coaching career that you've had?
Definitely imagined it, because when we took third in the country in 7, Sarah Reisman pulled me in her. She was my boss for like 19 years. I still call her boss, and she pulled me in and showed me my interview packet, and in it was about 10, 12 pages, and in it was like how we're going to develop the recruiting, the fan base, the alumni support, and all this, and to create a regional training center and all that kind of stuff, and all of that came. Almost everything was true in the book except winning the national title. And she's like, you told us you were going to do all this, and you did it. And I said, well, you got to have the vision to do it. And so I remember, you were probably one of them, Dave. Doing my first interview, I said, man, I'm here to win Big 12 titles and win the national, have national champs and create this and start winning dual meets. And people were laughing. You're not going to be able to do that. And all these young reporters like him over there probably laughing at me. I don't know if it was him.
I don't know if I was there yet.
Yeah.
Maybe.
What year were you at Mizzou?
I started in 96, but I wasn't writing
I was 98.
I started writing the summer of 98, so you had just gotten here.
Yeah.
It
was the spring when
first
I did
season,
the interview, so you're off the hook. I know you weren't one of them that laughed at me. But I loved it. That was what, laugh at us now. I remember teams laughing at us when we were getting beat 44-0, and I'm like, guys, remember that, because in a couple years, have respect when you're beating teams, because I'm going to remember that. You're going to remember that. It's going to fuel the fire to beat these teams. And it did. We remembered that stuff when we were beating them. We just, we expected it. That's part of expect to win. You shouldn't be jumping around and going crazy. We won the match. Let's go on to the next one.
So my first year, I started May of 21, so my first wrestling season would have been 21 to 22, and I'd never been around wrestling. My mom grew up in South Jersey, so she was so excited.
That's big time wrestling.
All her friends wrestled, and so she was really excited that I was at a school that had wrestling. But obviously, wrestling in the Hearn Center,
This
breaking
year
records.
we were over
Yeah.
3,200 every duel average.
Yes.
And had broke 6,000 for Okie State.
But you've said that's not always how it has been. So tell us about it. You said bleacher setup. I
Yeah.
think that's the story you've told. And
Yeah,
it
the
was
track's right
behind
behind me, right
us
behind
in the
curtain.
track, right? And that's where you used to wrestle. You just brought in bleachers,
They
and then
put
the
a
people
couple
started
sets
to
of
come.
bleachers on two sides of the mats, and the teams would be on the other two sides, and there would be like 50, 60 people at the duels. And we would rest because everybody was in the Hearns, so it was hard getting the Hearns arena. And so we would wrestle on the track, and it was kind of embarrassing. And I actually signed a kid, Jace Roller, whose dad, Shane, was an three-time All-American at Okie State. And when they were in on the visit, I said, Shane asked, he goes, did we wrestle on this track? I said, yes. And I looked at my assistant, see, that isn't a story, it's true. He's like, I remember. And he goes, I remember, we beat you guys pretty good, but it was closer than it should have been. And John made us run the stairwell here. So they got to run the stairs, not walk them like we do. But yes, we would be on the track. And I think it was, I forget what year, whenever there was, I think when the arena finally got built, we had more access to the arena, so we started having matches in there. But we were having our last duel in there, and we were wrestling Oklahoma, and Coach Pinkel brought the whole football team. Youth groups were coming. We were good. I mean, it was it was probably the year we won, maybe 18-3. And it was an awesome duel. We beat Oklahoma. The place was packed, mat side kids sitting, every bleacher, standing room. I mean, there was probably 1,500 people packed around a mat. But I knew after that day that we had outgrown the track and had to move it on into the arena. So it was I love the atmosphere that we had that day, but now the atmosphere in Hearns is electric. I've had opposing coaches say, man, your crowd is tough. The mat side people, they're almost they are so tough on
right
coaches because they're sitting right next to them. And it's the mat side seats sell out in a day.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. People fight for those tickets, and it's become a great atmosphere. Our team loves it. I mean, I'm literally sitting next to the crowd, and they're drinking beers. They walk up and just start talking to me. Can you imagine me walking up to drink as a fan right before a match? And I just smile about it and love it because I know I have to sacrifice that, putting them so close. That I guess we have to tell them maybe don't bother the coaches, but if it was during a match, I might say something. But it is a great. The fans love it, and the atmosphere.
That's been
it's a
created.
tailgate atmosphere too.
Yeah.
We got the bar on the floor, and then the food, and it's just the people come an hour and a half before now, and it's a giant 200 people tailgating. That they're the same people there, so it's like a giant box, suite that in the stadium that is we have on the floor of the Hearns.
I feel like a lot of the wrestling fans too have been supporting for a while now, and so they all know each other. So it's created this
community.
It's a community that, whether they knew each other before or how they got invested in the program, especially those like mat side seats, I swear everyone knows everyone. So you have a couple hundred people down there, but everyone knows everyone, and it's just a social hour, and then everyone sits and watches, and so it's quite the environment down there.
And throughout the arena too.
Absolutely.
When I look up and we're in the sea level with seating, and it's electric because the Hearns is built old school, straight up.
Yeah.
You're right on top, and it is so loud.
It gets so loud.
When we've had some big pins, that I feel like the roof is going to come off. It's so loud you can't hear yourself. It's fun.
I think it was, oh gosh, I'm going to screw this up. It had to have been Iowa State last year when Brock went. I think he went.
That was a couple years ago when we beat Iowa State.
Yes. And
Noah Certain got a pin.
Yes.
And then Brock pinned his guy in overtime.
And it was insane.
Oh, it was insane.
So loud. I'll never forget. Just I can picture it in my head right now. So it was crazy.
But that's the cool thing about sport. Like,
oh, absolutely.
When Mevis kicks the 61-yard field goal, I was with recruits and parents, and when he kicked it, I remember I'm like, this is awesome. This is a moment you're going to remember your whole life. That you were on this visit. Now you have to come. And I said, your sons are probably on the field right now. And they were like, oh, that's so cool.
Yeah.
But that's what college is. These moments in college that are special. That I mean, it's just that's you talk about the student athlete experience. When the guys get together, they talk about those great moments.
Yeah.
And that's a fun thing throughout all college athletics. It's those special moments where you've put the time in and something special happens during that event, and it's remembered by people from all over.
Absolutely.
This episode of Mizzou Storytellers on the Inside Mizzou Athletics podcast is brought to you by Sophia's and Addison's Restaurants. Sophia's and Addison's Restaurants are great local spots to visit before or after all Mizzou home games. Addison's has 2 locations in Southwest and downtown Columbia and features over 20 beers on tap, including local brewers and, of course, their famous Nachos Bianco. So remember, before or after the game, stop by Addison's.
I love talking about the program, but I also want to talk about your family because I've always asked these questions. So,
Yeah.
Denise, your wife,
She's a rock star.
she is a rock star. So I'm
she
famous.
could be the mayor of Columbia.
Probably.
Well,
and,
yes.
and not spend one dime because she's the most popular person. I always tell her that. I go to events and I sit back and she talks to everybody, knows everybody. No, it's crazy.
Well, and I think it's funny because I literally have in here, like, I know she runs the house. Like,
Oh,
I know,
yeah.
I know you run Tiger Style. You're the head coach, but I know who the real boss is. So how did you meet her?
Okay.
Where did you get engaged? Those are I'm famous for those questions.
So I got my greatest job ever. Okay, and I was just with another kid that I'm my brother's friends with, and we were in Nashville together, and we were talking about it because somebody asked, "Hey, how did you guys meet?" And we told them the story, and Matt was there because Matt's mom was a principal of this elementary school in Davie, down the road where I was at the high school. And I was like, "Man, I need a summer job. I don't want to teach history in the summer. I want to do something better." And she's like, "I got this after-school program where you could be the after-school PE guy, and you'll work with this person." And she was setting us up. And I get there on the first day, and I see this girl, and I'm like, "Oh, my God, look at this. I get to work with her every day." And the job was 12 to 5. So it was just amazing because I was in Fort Lauderdale at the time, so I could sleep. I could go out late and sleep in till whatever time, start work at noon, be outside in the sun enjoying it, and then I could open up the wrestling room at 5:30, have weights and wrestling, and then go back to go to sleep. You go out and go to sleep till whatever time. It was amazing. And I was getting paid like $20 an hour.
All right.
This is a long time ago, so it was awesome. But we were on the outdoor events or whatever for after-school care, and I always tell her I wowed her with my smoothie and bouncy kickball pitches. And so we were stuck together the whole summer and just became really close, and then started dating, and next thing you know, we're married a couple years later. So it was I honestly don't even know of bad days. She is a rock star because a year after we met, we were madly in love, and then I tell her I'm going to Ithaca, New York. And she stayed and taught another year, and then we got engaged and got married the next year. And she came up, but she got moved to Ithaca. Then we had to go to Syracuse, buy a new house. 8 months later, we're selling a new house and going to Cornell, and just had to find a house there. And coming to Missouri from Syracuse, it was just crazy, bouncing around. But she has just been unbelievable in what she would do, and raising the kids when I'm on the road, and all 3 of my kids graduated from Missouri, love Mizzou. I mean, they are so happy. We moved across the street now into the grassland, so they're like, "Oh, that's awesome!" So we can walk home from the bars. The Uber was like $30 to Thornbrook, so now it's they didn't care about the house. They cared that the Uber, they don't have to get an Uber now.
So you have 2 boys and a girl.
Yes.
I want to know, like, did any of them have any interest in wrestling / did they wrestle?
Yes, Quinn wrestled here.
Okay.
Quinn actually, I kind of pushed Quinn to go wrestle somewhere else.
Okay.
Probably a mistake as a father, and he went to South Dakota State, and all he did was compare it to how much better it was at Mizzou. Came back, was doing well, won a tournament and things, but then messed up his knee for like the 3rd time. So we medicaled him, but he helped out, was like the assistant to the regional manager of the director of ops, we used to call him, and he would help out and do things and stayed part of the program. Still lives with wrestlers in Chicago.
Cool.
And got his business degree, then he got his MBA from here. Now he's working for Oracle and working out of Chicago. Why you would want to live in Chicago, but so cold. I just can't take the cold. But when the Mets play, I have a place to stay.
There
when
you
they
go.
beat
There
the
you go.
Cubs. So
There you
when
go.
they beat the Cubs, you heard that. But the
I'm
Cubs
a
usually get us. That's crazy. But then, so he did that and loved sport. So it was wrestling. So it was hard too because I had to miss a lot of his wrestling. And Denise was terrible at calling me when he was wrestling because FaceTime didn't exist when he was younger. So she would call me and do play-by-play, and I'm like, what the hell's going on? I remember being at Rutgers for the national duels one time, and I'm like, he was wrestling to qualify for state, and she was trying to give me a, so that was that. You know, he was doing that. Kylie was a dancer.
Okay.
And danced out of the Nancy Laurie's dance thing. Oh, I forget the name of it.
Academy.
That's terrible.
Yeah.
CPAC.
Yeah.
CPAC. So, and that's how Dr. Tarbox, his daughters dance, and he's been my team doc for like 24 years. We would sit at the dances, just, yes, our daughter's dancing. And I'd be like, and anytime I would say, man, this is so long, my wife would look at me and she goes, wrestling tournaments are an eternity. Don't even complain. You're with your daughter here. And I'm like, you're right. Your wrestling tournaments are worse than this. So she danced, and but she had a love for fashion. That my mom was an artist, was an art student, and went to like a high school. If you remember the movie Fame, I'm really showing my age, but where they have high schools in New York that are music and art, and that's it. She went to a high school for art and went to college, but then married my dad and didn't finish college. But she was an artist, so a football coach and an artist, what a mixture. But my daughter is very close with my mom, and it was always fashion, and Rockbridge had programs with that too. And so she went into the TAM program here, Textile Apparel and Merchandise. We have one of the best in the country.
Really cool program.
Yes. So one summer she's asking me, hey, Dad, it was spring break. I want to go on spring break. You get a credit for going. It costs this. And I was like, wow, it costs that much? And, well, you got to fly. You got to spend the week. They're going to have you meeting people that are from Mizzou that are in the business. And I'm like, no way am I spending that much and this and that. I'll answer you in the morning. And I thought, man, I think of the amount of money kids travel for travel sports and wrestling and all that. And I'm like, what I did, spending the summer with my cousin, you know, the commitment. I'm like, would I take this away from my daughter? And of course she went and fell in love with, you know, New York and what it was about. Always dreamed of living there. Met a company, got an internship that summer. They eventually hired her, and she's lived basically since she's graduated in New York City.
Money well worth spent then.
Well, I didn't crush a dream.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I talk about that a lot, that your reaction to young people or people that have a vision. Sometimes people are, well, why do you want to do that? And because I had a young man come to me after he graduated, and he had just went to Europe and was drinking beer and Oktoberfest and all that or you know, whatever it was, and writing me emails saying, Coach, I think I've figured out. And he was an artist, and he comes to me. He was an art student here, and I'm like, what's up? He wanted to meet and just, you know, tell me about his life. And he's like, Coach, I think I want to be a doctor. And I'm like, my first reaction was that. And then I'm thinking, don't say it. And I'm like, hey, how many science classes did you take when you were an art student? He's like, no, I know, I got to take a bunch. I do have that mapped out. I'm like, okay, so you have it mapped out. You realize this is going to take years just to then do a ton of years.
Yeah.
Well, he just sent me a note. He's winning awards, John Andrews. He not only got into med school after a couple of years, he did internships at Columbia University, was getting awards back then for, you know, projects he was doing, got into Yale. He graduates from Yale. He's now he's at one of the top hospitals in California. He's a neurosurgeon. He's doing all sorts of research on epilepsy, and I even called him when a kid was having seizures and things. So he's doing all this stuff. He's winning awards for things, and he's crushing it. And now he sent me an email, I think 3 days ago. It was so awesome that he's still living it. So, but it was just cool. I didn't say, you can't do that, right?
You went to school
You can't
for
say that to a kid that has a dream, because, I mean, my dad said, go out for wrestling, it'll be good. But then when I told him I'm not going to play football, he didn't say, no, you got to play football. He said, I thought he would hate me, but he said, then go be the best wrestler. And he gave me the keys to it, that go do it.
Yeah.
And that was something I learned as a young kid, that your reaction to young people when they have this dream, don't take it away. When a kid wants to be an astronaut, push them to be an astronaut.
Yeah.
You know, don't take that dream away.
Yeah. No.
That's awesome.
And then Braden just graduated with sports management, so he's looking for a job in athletics. So hopefully I'm pushing him and kicking him, keep applying. So it's a tough business.
It's a tough business, I will say. It's a lot of who you know
Yeah.
and where you're willing to travel to get there. So
He got to work with football for 2 years, and it was cool. And
which is cool.
this year was special. He
Yeah,
got to,
absolutely.
be a part of the Cotton Bowl champs, and it was neat because I got to go to my first bowl game because it happened to work with a day off and getting down there. Denise was so excited because she knew everybody on the trip, of course, and we never get to do things like that in the middle of wrestling season. And that day we got to go down there. We didn't get to see Braden for Christmas, so Braden was working, and seeing him on the field. I sent a picture because my dad has since passed, and my mom, and I was like, look at Braden's on the field for Mizzou, Ohio State, working with the staff. It was a special moment.
Yeah, no,
Absolutely.
Should I get into rapid fire?
Let's go.
All right.
Go.
So
Rapid
we do
fire.
one of our second to last segment is rapid fire. So hopefully it's quick. But favorite restaurant in Columbia?
Oh, man, that's a tough question because then they'll all get mad at me because I love all of them. I love to go. I mean, CC City Broiler if I want a good steak. If I want the really ambiance of the atmosphere, the great, it's Murray's with the piano, and my wife and I enjoy going there.
Yep.
And then, of course, I like billiards for a good burger.
There you go.
I
I mean, I can go through like 20. We are so lucky.
You got 27 years of answers here.
Yeah,
Come
I know.
on.
I know.
No,
That's
but
why I
it's-
wanted to know.
There are so many good restaurants. I mean, D Rose is awesome. Their wings are. We always take kids there.
Yep.
And then if you want good barbecue, you're going to go to Bud's. I mean,
Yep.
I could tell you a million that I have to go out a lot because of recruiting.
Sure.
Yes.
So we do, use, and this isn't, everybody's you like Shakespeare's. I like Shakespeare. I like pizza, but it's not my favorite because we don't have great New York style.
No.
Well,
I'm a New Yorker.
So another rapid fire was your go-to pizza topping because I know you're from Good Pizza.
Yeah, I haven't found that. Probably, I don't know what my favorite pizza would be because I haven't found greasy, nasty.
I know.
Actually, one of my wrestlers from Syracuse, Mario, brings New York-style pizza to the national tournament every year. He brought 10 pies.
Oh, wow.
For you.
He drove them in a car, brought them into the locker room, and all the guys are like, what are these pizzas doing? And I said, I get pizza every year. He brings pizza, New York style.
It's
awesome.
amazing. I mean, I can understand it.
It's
the
awesome.
pizza up there is way better. Okay, one wrestler that if you could wrestle them, you would want to wrestle them, having watched them wrestle.
On my team?
Just in your
In
all
your
your
peak,
years.
in your peak
Yeah.
against somebody.
Oh, I'd want to wrestle Noah because we have a battle. And if you ever came in our room, he's feisty. And if you watch him on the mat, he's feisty. I'd like to, and he's going to laugh about this. I'd love to. I'm getting too old. I grabbed him a couple times, but I can't do it anymore. I'm going to be 59 years
If
old.
you get
Have
hurt
back,
wrestling
knee,
at work,
shoulder, elbow.
I'm
you
sure
name a surgery, I've had it. So
Denise would probably be mad about that.
Yeah.
I'm sure if you have to call her, hey, can you come pick me up? I tried to wrestle Noah. at
Noah just tore my
practice.
shoulder.
Yeah, Noah separated
but it would
my
just
shoulder.
be a lot of trash talk, and it would be a good pay-per-view event
There you
because
go.
all the former guys would
There you go.
want to pay and watch me
All
beat
about the
his
marketing.
ass. So
Yeah, there we go. Next alumni event. Your favorite vacation destination?
Key West, that's where we went on our honeymoon and went on our 25th, and it's just a cool. If you ever been to Key West?
No, but my dad and stepmom go. Well, being in
Mhm.
Davie, they would drive down. They did
Yep.
Thanksgiving there a lot, and they
It's
love
the most
it.
beautiful drive. So don't fly to
Yeah.
Key West. Fly into Miami or Lauderdale.
Yep.
Take the drive. Both sides are the ocean.
Yeah.
Then you get down there and you just bring shorts, flip-flops,
Yep.
a hat, maybe some sunglasses, and all the bars are wide open, and it's just music. It's it's Jimmy
Yeah.
Buffett songs.
No, they
It's-
absolutely
You're
love it.
actually living the Jimmy
The
Buffett song
lifestyle,
down
yeah.
there.
Yeah,
And
no.
it is the most fun place for me to go.
And last one is a bucket list item that you have.
The bucket list is writing my book. I've passion for reading books, and people would bug me about what books you're reading, when you're going to write a book. So I am working on chapters 3 and 4 right now. So it's going to be about 8 or 9 chapters. So it's exciting. We got the intro. Just got to edit the first and the intro and first chapter. So I'm in the middle of one of my huge bucket lists,
That's
and of
awesome.
course the other is to win a national title for the University of Missouri.
Well, Very exciting.
Can't
Thanks.
wait for both.
Yes, I
Yeah.
know.
For
Can't
both.
wait for both. All right. Last part is that we want to put you up on the board. So have
And you
your-
realize I haven't changed my picture
Yeah.
in about.
Oh, we've heard.
And-
We've heard.
And Jess always gets so mad at me. When are
Yeah.
you going to change that picture? I
Yes.
said, one of these days I'll go down. I just always miss the picture day on purpose.
Yeah. Well, I was getting it, and I was like, I wonder if he's going to be like. I mean, this is literally your headshot on the website. So.
Yep.
What year was this taken?
I have no idea.
No idea.
When my guys come back, they're like, Coach, I'll be like, did you wrestle with Coach? He was like 10 years after me.
Yeah.
Everybody blends together. So that was probably last week.
That's what we'll tell Jess.
Sure.
All right. You can put it anywhere on the board.
You have to
All
do
right.
it.
Oh, I should put it over Mike. Just put it right there. Mike would be mad at me. I'll be right here in the
There you
top
go.
corner.
Don't knock it over. There we go. You're good. You're good.
Good.
Well, this was great, Brian. I was trying to think the other night, like, I don't like the Mount Rushmore questions, like who's on the Mount Rushmore of Mizzou coaches, but like, you know, I like to appreciate the history here, and like, I tried to think of it. It's Don Farrow, it's Dan Devine, it's Norm Stewart, it's Hy Simmons who won a national championship, Tom Botts won the national championship, it's Gary Pinkel, and it's this man.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Brian
I don't
Smith.
want to. I don't like to talk.
You're
about
in that
things like
tier,
that.
and you don't have to talk about it because you're the only one of those guys still coaching. But you're in that
The
tier.
cool thing is I got to hang out with Norm Stewart.
Yeah.
I still talk with Norm. I'll see him up in the suites of
Yeah.
football games, and we'll talk. He actually coached at Northern Iowa
Yeah,
with Bill Cole, who was a legendary wrestler from
Yeah.
there, and was coaching there, and they became friends. Rob Cole is who I worked under at Cornell
Yeah.
for the 4 years and was in my wedding, and it's just really the dynamic, just finding that out. But Norm was awesome,
yeah,
and and Gary and I are close,
Yeah.
good friends, and it's just neat to be around those people. And I saw what they had to do, and just the struggles and where Mizzou has come from. And I've read some of the books of like the book when Dan Devine was here,
Yeah,
the 60
yeah.
team. What's the name of that book?
it's
That-
The Respectable Roughnecks just came out. Yeah.
awesome.
It's
I
on my
read it.
desk.
I read it
haven't
on a
finished
road trip.
Yeah,
I was
you told
so
me that.
fired up
yeah.
how good it is.
Yeah,
So I love reading, and that one was, to me, it's a history book of
Yeah.
the athletic department. It should be almost a mandatory summer school reading
There
for
you
the
go.
student athletes, that you really hear about what Mizzou was like and how it brought passion to the football program.
absolutely. Yeah. Well, you're part of that history, a big part, and
Well,
and you're
that
not
was-
done yet either.
But
It's
that's
not
a-
all
that's-
history.
You
It's
wanna
current
be.
events.
I tell that to my guys, that you can be the greatest team in Mizzou history. That's something always
Yeah.
we talk about. That should be a goal of yours. That when people talk, you want them to talk about the 2025 Mizzou wrestling team and what they did, and that would you can be history,
Yeah.
the greatest ever, and that's an opportunity, and that's what I had an opportunity to come coach here, and I remember, just to throw it off real quick, to make it. I think it was Kopp and Happ, all the former coaches, and
Yeah.
Wes were all like about 10 years. So, man, when I started getting close to 10, I started like looking around like, oh man, is this the end? But now we're on 27, so I'm not too worried about that.
No,
Now it's
I
will
think
I
you're.
make it to
I
30?
think you're safe. I think you're
Oh,
safe.
yeah. Well, this was fantastic.
It was a lot
I
of fun.
do. As we wrap up, what's something that our millions of listeners should look forward to and be excited about for the upcoming wrestling season?
We always have a great team coming back. I mean that we graduated 3 studs with Brock Mahler and Peyton Mako and Zach Elam, but the other 7 are back. So you got 7 studs back. Cam Steed is a kid. Remember that name?
Yeah.
He lost to Brock 3-2 in the Tiger Style Invite. Would have been ranked probably top 10 in the country at 57. Broke his hand and didn't wrestle most of the rest of the season, but just took 3rd at the U20 world qualifier. He's very, very good. So he's going to be filling in. You're going to have some really talented kids filling in, and the other 7 returning. Peyton with Hawks and Edmond both lost in the All-American round. Keegan O'Toole is back. I had to tell people in St. Louis, they're like, oh, it's too bad Keegan's gone. No,
No.
he's back.
He's back.
He's a COVID baby. He gets to come back. And Rocky Elam's back. 2 4-time All-Americans going for 5 All-Americans, which you can't get that
No.
pretty much after they leave. It can't happen anymore. Noah Certain tore his hamstring at the end of the season. Still went to nationals, but was ranked top 10 all season, beat a lot of the guys that placed, but tore his hamstring in a match that he was winning big. And I'm looking forward to his senior year next year, and then he's going to go on and probably become a doctor and whatever he's going to do. He's in health sciences, but he's a kid coming back. That we just have a special group coming back. Cade Moore is a freshman qualified and was banged up and had an incident happen where he didn't get to wrestle for 5-6 weeks. That we have that whole group back, that it's exciting with a couple new guys filling in for the guys that left.
Awesome. Well, we're counting down the days, and we're excited for Mizzou Wrestling to be back. So thank you again for taking the time. This was so fantastic. Learned so much, and glad we got to share your story.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Coach. Appreciate
Denise
it.
is in it. She'll be excited.
Oh,
I'll
yeah.
tell her. You
Yeah.
got mentioned. She's like, no, you didn't embarrass me, right? But
No,
No.
I know who runs the Smith household.
she does.
All right. Thanks, Brian. Appreciate it.
Take care.
This episode of Mizzou Storytellers on the Inside Mizzou Athletics podcast is brought to you by Raceline Alternative Energy. Raceline Alternative Energy is working for a better future in rural Missouri. They are working to restore millions of acres of native prairie plants, which can be harvested to produce highly valuable clean energy called prairie power. Visit them online at racelinealternativeenergy.com.
That was fantastic.
He is a master storyteller.
He really is, and I appreciate his open and honesty throughout that, and I think he went in depth on a lot of things, and I have heard him speak out throughout my time here and have heard some of those stories, but it was just really cool to hear even more from childhood. I mean, what kid knows at 5 years old that they're going to do something?
Oh, I know.
At 5 years old, I'm sure I said I wanted to be a princess or something like that. So,
and he can trace it all back to his dad, too, which is my favorite part. Like, he just knew that was in his DNA, and it's what he wanted to do, and his dad, kind of helped usher him through those decisions. We kind of referenced that a story that I did on Brian. I think it was in 2015, and I actually interviewed his dad, who has since passed away, and he was so proud of him. It was to think that was 9 years ago, and think of all that he has achieved since then. It's pretty great. And I wasn't like trying to put him on the spot, but like he is when you think about Mizzou coaches and what their contributions, he's done as much, if not more, than all of them. I mean, because it's not just the winning and the championships. The guy created a brand. He created a culture out of nothing. And now it's a national brand in a sport that, maybe doesn't get the national recognition. It does in certain parts of the country. But in a sport that, unfortunately, it's not part of the SEC, and that's not his fault. He's done everything he can to maneuver and navigate the program through conferences after the conference switch a decade plus ago. But all that he has done and contributed in the fundraising he's done, we barely got into that, but he's done a ton for his program. What he's done up in the penthouse in this building, it's all so impressive. I can't wait to read that book. I know he's talked about it before, but it's going to be great.
Yeah. I just think it's cool that he, to your point, like created a brand, but he really saw through it all. Like he came here and he knew what he was getting into a program that was going to not be as great, and he really worked through that, created the identity, figured out how to establish a culture, how to create the brand. And looking back, it's one of the most exciting sports we have, is to come out to Hearn Center and watch them wrestle and watch them compete for national championships year in, year out. And so I just think it's really cool that over his 27 years, he could have seen success and he could have found a job elsewhere, and he, Missouri is a place that he made home, and he created Tiger Style, and so he really stuck through, and I have no doubt year 30 he'll be here.
Yeah, I loved your question. You asked him, 27 years ago, his press conference being announced was 27 years ago in a few days, if he would have imagined all this. And I loved his answer even more. He's like, of course. That's why I came here.
Absolutely.
To do all of this. And a part of him feels like I haven't done enough because he hasn't won the national championship, which is crazy to think that Brian Smith hasn't done enough here.
No.
He's done it all. And that will come. Like I've always believed, like, if there's any coach that's going to do it in any sport, it's going to be him.
No, absolutely.
And imagine what that day will be like.
Yeah, absolutely. I do want to say that I read a book probably, I don't know, maybe a few years ago, and it was talking about like habits and how, you create these habits and it helps you throughout your day. So him saying like taking the stairs and all that, I make my bed every morning and I can't leave before I to go to work. Even if I'm going to be late, I have to make my bed, because if I have the worst day ever, at least I accomplished one thing. So I agree with him in that sense of I have to. And my mom and dad wish I probably read the book way earlier, because my dad used to yell at me when I was little because I did not make my bed.
Yeah.
And my mom would say, why? And I used to say, you're just going to get back in it. What's the point? But it's the thought of accomplishing a task like so
Sure.
early in the morning. So
Sure. I'm glad I resisted talking about my prolific wrestling career with Coach Smith in the room.
we should have asked.
There was a common theme. So he talked about the huge match win over Oklahoma State and Hazelwood Central High School in the gym. I think I had a wrestling match there in high school. It did not go well for me. It went well for my opponent. It was over very fast.
Yeah.
I was not good. I did it my freshman year of high school. I wrestled, and it was not a great experience.
Well, yeah, we didn't really have wrestling, I don't think. We definitely didn't have wrestling in my school, but my mom talks about it. So in COVID, when there was no sports on, ESPN was rerunning like 2011 or 2012 wrestling championships. And so my mom and I sat on the couch and watched it, because my mom she loves watching wrestling.
Yeah.
Growing up in New Jersey, like I said, all her friends, her brother did it. And so we rewatched it, and she was like teaching me all these different things. This was before I knew I was coming to Missouri, a year before. So I didn't know anything until I came here, and I've learned a lot.
You've learned a lot. Yeah. I want to go to the Michael Chandler fight.
Yeah.
How about that?
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah. Against Conor McGregor.
Yeah.
And they were on the show together where they were the two coaches. It was on like last year. I forget the name of it, when they're training the next great fighter, and then they turned it into the match that they're going to have. So that should be fun.
Yeah, it should be fun.
I almost made the mistake of asking him if he's going to be in Michael's corner, but they're in a circle ring. There's no corner in a ring. I would have sounded really dumb.
Well, I'm glad you refrained from asking
I did.
that question.
Yeah.
So
We should have Coach Smith write a story from there, and he's a writer now.
Oh yeah.
And we could post that on mutigers.com of his experience watching one of his proteges fight in the biggest, pay-per-view that's going to be on for that month at least. Should we do that? Should we send a creative with him? One of your staff members?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Sounds
Now
good.
everybody knows we're going to do it because we just talked about it on the podcast.
Yeah, you did talk about it on the podcast, and we didn't talk about it offline. So good job, Dave. We will figure that one out. Thank you. Do we have any questions of the week, or not really?
I did not get any. We got a lot of questions at the
Come home tour.
Come Home Tour last night. Our fans are very curious about a lot of things, and we talked about a lot of excitement about everything going on, and lots of media were there. My old media friends were there interviewing our coaches and Laird and our student athletes. But did you get any questions this week?
No, I didn't, unfortunately.
Well, that's no fun.
I know.
You could always make one up.
Yeah. Hey, I'm emceeing tonight at baseball. Well, this whole weekend, so hopefully I don't embarrass myself or at the podcast.
You're emceeing? You're like the PA announcer?
No, I'm emceeing.
Oh, you're like out on the...
Yeah.
Fun.
So everyone better get excited. It's going to be great.
I'm a little busy tonight. The 8th graders have their big 8th grade dance.
Oh, yeah, that's
and
so fun.
I've been roped into driving them.
I can still
So I can't
picture,
make tonight's game.
I can still picture my 8th grade dance
It
dress.
was like 14 years ago.
Well,
Less than that.
No, it would have been 12 years
12
ago.
years
probably.
ago. Okay.
It would have been 2012. 2012, because I started high school in August of 2012. It was side note, you'll understand why I'm segueing this. So I don't wear navy blue and black. Like, it's like not in my wardrobe. I had a cheer coach that would yell at you if you wore navy blue and black. He was like, it's not.
Like together or
together.
ever?
It doesn't go together.
No, you can't. Yeah.
Okay, well, I wore my 8th grade dress, and my mom hopefully will know exactly what I'm talking about. It was almost like, it was strapless, because I felt like so cool, but it was a strapless, almost bubble-like dress. Like, it had, I don't know why, that was a weird style, and it was black with like navy blue literal bubbles on them. That's what it looked like, and then had like a bow in the back. You can picture it now. Not cute.
Can I find this like on Facebook?
I'm sure if you Google like 2012, no, I don't have any pictures of it on Facebook.
Of
but,
you,
like,
not of the. Okay, not just the generic dress.
I could find the generic dress, but
Okay.
yeah, not cute. Don't know why I liked it. Loved the dress. 8th
Did you
grade.
have a good time?
I think so. I don't really remember that part of it as much. It was in my 8th. It was my cafeteria. I think it was in the cafeteria or the gym.
Exciting. My 8th grade dance would have been in 1992, so that was
I think my parents were just starting to date.
Yep. Brian Smith wasn't even the coach here yet. He was at Cornell, I think.
Yeah,
so,
I think he was at Cornell.
Dating myself.
Mm-hmm.
He talks about how he's dating himself with his stories, and I just did the same.
Yeah. I have to tell you this because I thought it was funny, but I didn't want to say anything. So Dave drove the van, and
to the come home
tour, and I made note that you passed by like every pop song, like he kept dialing through the radio, and I just thought it was funny, but I was just didn't want to mention it to you because I thought I would like let it play out and see if it happened. But every time there was like a pop song,
we had like Michael Jackson on for a while. I let that play.
Yeah, like this van was Dave, me, and then I think like 5 other people who were under the age of 25, and yet he played only oldies, which is like totally fine, but I just think it was really funny.
I didn't even know you were conscious. You were sound asleep.
I was asleep, and then when I woke up, I noticed it, and I just thought it was funny. So I was like, oh, I'm going to mention this on the podcast.
I don't have a problem with pop music.
I think you do.
There weren't many stations available.
Well,
so
no, you were going through all of the pop stations.
I figured I was annoying people by switching the station because I don't like listening to the commercials on the radio.
I didn't mind that. I just thought it was funny when like Tate McRae would come on.
I don't know who that is.
You just skipped. There was no country and no pop music. You just.
I don't mind
by
some
those.
country music.
I know, but it was just I noticed
David Nail's
it.
listening, and he thinks I hate country music. I don't hate country music.
I didn't say you hated it.
Okay.
I just said you skipped it over.
I don't like poppy country music, so that's what I would have.
You don't like pop music.
That's what I was skipped. Well, I don't, like it's not my jam right now.
There was 6 people under the age of 26 in the car, and
They could have been. I would have been more than happy to entertain their wishes on the drive.
I just thought it would be funnier to not say anything and to tell you on the podcast than.
Really?
Yes, I did.
I thought I was getting the silent treatment the whole drive.
Oh gosh, no! I was sleeping, and then I was just paying attention to you. Browsing through all the pop music, which was funny.
Okay, well, sorry.
No, I
You
didn't
could have
care.
controlled it yourself. I wouldn't have minded.
I didn't care. I just thought it was funny.
I got you there safe, did I not?
He did get us there safe, which is great.
Yeah.
That's all that matters.
Uh-huh.
So, all right, let's wrap this up.
Do we have anything more to discuss?
I don't think so.
Who's going to be our next guest?
I don't know. We have a long list of people who are trying to get on.
We do, including the new athletics director.
Yeah.
But you know what?
What?
Everyone has a beautiful story to tell, as long as you ask the right questions and are willing to listen. This is Mizzou Storytellers.
I'm Nikki Berry.
And I'm Dave Matter.
We'll see you next time.